get in the way of too much of anything. So we'll sort of officially kick off. Again, thank you all for joining us. Nice turnout, and hopefully maybe another person or two will join us along the way. But we thought for today's meeting, we would sort of give you an idea of what the big Y700 DNA test is. Or as I said, what the heck is a SNP anyway? First of all, getting started, here's a photo. That's yours truly in the middle. This photo is probably a good 15 years old, from a genealogy group over in Pennsylvania across the river from where I live. And this was in the early days of DNA testing. And we often got questions, believe it or not, from people who would say, well, if I'm going to learn about my ancestors' DNA, do we have to like go dig them up to get it? Because DNA was just so unfamiliar to people. And so we went out to the local cemetery on a rainy day and took this picture just to sort of give an explanation that no, you don't have to dig up great-great-great-great-grandpa in order to find out things about his DNA or grandma. Because we carry our ancestors' DNA around inside of us, and that's why we take DNA tests. And when we submit a DNA sample, yes, that's our DNA, but at the same time, it's our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents and so on DNA. And in some cases, back eons ago in time. So that's what we're looking at. Very briefly, there are basically three kinds of DNA tests, and each of them has their own strengths and weaknesses and can tell you things that the others can't and so forth. The first one that we're all probably very familiar with is the autosomal DNA test. It's the kind of test you get from Ancestry, 23andMe, Family Tree DNA's Family Finder, and others. And anyone can take this test, males or females. And as you know, we get half of our DNA from our father, half from our mother, approximately a quarter from our grandparents, approximately 12.5% from their parents, and so forth. And the autosomal test can give you information about all of your family lines reliably about 6 generations back. You can push those boundaries in some cases, but beyond that, it really doesn't tell you that much or can't tell you that much. So that's just what that is. We're not going to go there. The 23 in 23andMe, of course, refers to the 23 pairs of chromosomes that we all have. And autosomal tests look at the first 22 pairs. That 23rd pair, of course, as we know, is sometimes called the sex chromosomes. They determine the gender of the individual. When these pairs of chromosomes split off and recombine, one half that pair comes from the mother, one comes from the father. In the terms of the 23rd pair, the female contributes an X because a female has an X and an X chromosome. Males have an X and a Y chromosome. Where's my cursor? I've lost it. But you see that tiny little weak, puny chromosome down there is the Y chromosome. And only males can pass it, and they pass it on to their sons. And so, how do I get back to mitochondrial? I got ahead of myself, but we'll jump back. Yeah. We'll get back to that. But the Y DNA test, which is what we're going to be talking about today, because only males have a Y chromosome and they only pass it on to their sons, the genetic information on that Y chromosome gets passed down through a direct male line down to one of us males. And the good thing about that makes the Y DNA test so valuable for genealogy is because in most Western cultures, when a woman married a man, she took the surname of her husband, and the children from that marriage took the surname of the father. So the sons of this union would have the same surname as the father, and going on and on and on down. And that happy conjunction between the Y chromosome passing through the direct male line and the surname following it makes it possible for us to establish surname projects. And that's how that works. Now, I'll backtrack just a quick, and the other type of DNA test, which I have no direct experience with, is mitochondrial DNA. And without going into the science behind it, let me just say, we all have our mother's mitochondria, mitochondrial DNA. So anyone can take a mitochondrial DNA test. What it tells you is your mother's mitochondria, who got it from her mother, who got it from her mother, and so on. So it's the direct maternal line, just like the Y DNA is the direct paternal line. This test is not as useful in DNA, in genealogy, simply for the fact that, as we know, because of that convention of women taking the surname of their husbands, with every generation you go back, you're going to have a different surname. And at some point in time, we all run into brick walls where we either don't know the maiden name of a great grandmother, or even if we do know it, we don't know exactly who her parents were. So you kind of hit a brick wall on that. Also, very quickly, mitochondrial DNA mutates at a very slow rate compared to even Y DNA and other kinds. And I think a mutation happens about every something like 2,000 years. So two people can match exactly on their mitochondrial DNA, and that common female ancestry could be, back in Roman times. So we're not going to dwell on those. I'm not even going to go about, what mitochondria is. That's for another talk. This little illustration is, of course, it's an engine from a car, an internal combustion engine. And I used this analogy before, but I am no mechanic of any kind, I will confess. I have the only general idea of how an internal combustion engine works. And if I had to work on one, I would be totally lost. I just don't know the mechanics involved. And it's the same thing with DNA. There's a lot of mechanics involved in knowing how DNA works, how it gets passed on, and that sort of thing. And that can be very interesting. And if you want to investigate and educate yourself on that, there's tons of material out there on the internet and in printed materials to help you. We're not going to concentrate on the mechanics, on the engine today. What we're going to concentrate, because as I say in my analogy, I don't know much about how an engine works, but I do know how to drive the car. And I don't need to know exactly how the engine works in order to be able to drive the car. And it's the same thing with DNA. You don't have to know all of that science as long as you have the tools and the skills to get your results, look at them, understand them, and know how to apply them to your research. So today we're going to be looking at more how to drive the car than we are getting into all that engine stuff. If you've participated in the DNA project or had someone or have looked at our FTDNA Parks project site, you'll see that there are a good number of groups that are genetically connected. And I've chosen, again, group 34 today because they're going to be our example for a number of things. And if you look at this, you might wonder initially what all of this means when you first expose yourself to it. Well, first of all, just as a little tour guide through here, there's the group number. Here is a designation, and that is a SNP haplogroup. And we'll talk about SNPs in a moment, but that's a very large overarching umbrella that everybody in a group descends from. Next to that, if you're a Park Society member, you're familiar with our lineage key system, our system of identifying different lineages with either a 1 or a 2-letter number designation. So here we have in this group lineage keys G, GO, GW, JM, and those are some of the lineages that are involved in here. There are some in here that don't have lineage keys. They've never been assigned. They're not in our database. Over in this column, these numbers, simply the test kit number of each participant. The next column over is the surname of the participant, because we don't identify people on the public website by name. And so you can see in this group, all of the participants have some variation on the park's name. There is one outlier. There's a gentleman in here with the Jones surname. If somebody can put themselves on mute, I'm a little over talking.
Right now, only one pump is running. It's Black Oak.
Okay.
Hey, Becky, it's your phone that seems to be
It's me.
off mute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Sorry, couldn't
Okay.
tell that was me.
Okay. And hi, Susan, by the way. I didn't know you jumped in. The next field over simply is the earliest known ancestor in that participant's line, with a little bit of information on them. This is all supplied by the test participants themselves. So it varies, and in some cases you see where it's blank. They haven't chosen to enter that information. Next to that, country of origin. Again, a lot of people put unknown origin, or Ireland, Scotland, Northern Ireland. Again, that's all supplied by the participant themselves. This next row of numbers is what confuses a lot of people. And again, we see RM269, which is over here. That's that overarching SNP mutation that everybody in the project descends from. But you'll see different colors and different numbers below that mixed in with there. And we'll talk about those in more detail soon, but those are people, anybody who's there in green has taken a big Y 700 test. And because of that, they are able to have their, what they call terminal SNP identified. Now, terminal doesn't mean it's fatal. It just means on the branch of the haplotree, as we get smaller and smaller branches on that haplotree, this is the end of the branch, at least for now, for each participant. A string of numbers to the right, these are called markers, and they are called STIR markers. STIR, STR, stands for short tandem repeat. I could explain what those are, but that's talking about the engine. And right now, all you need to know is it's a series of numbers, and we compare those numbers with others in the group. My cursor, here's my cursor. You can see there's a big block of people in this project who all match each other, at least in the number of markers that we're looking at in this screen grab. This table extends far to the right, all the way up to 111 markers. But for our purposes, just looking at this group, you can see everybody in this group up here matches each other exactly. And there's a block of people down here who have a different marker value than these people, but they match each other exactly. So everybody in this 18 pink group here is a genetic distance of 0 to each other. Everybody in this group up here that matches entirely is a genetic distance of 0 with each other within that group. Genetic distance simply means we count up the number of mutations between participants and add them up. So in this case, the group in pink below is one marker difference, or one unit difference on this only one marker. That's a genetic distance of 1 from these two groups. And down below, there's somebody with more mutational differences. Again, we count up the number of mutations and how far off they are, add them together, and get a genetic distance, for instance, down here of 3 to one group and 4 to another. Generally, in the old days, before we had SNP testing, genetic distance was a general guide to how closely or in time you might be connected to another person. It was far from exact, and as Dr. Lee Martinez, who we'll refer to more later on, has said, genetic distance is a fairly blunt instrument, and it's true. It was all we had to work with before. We had these SNP markers, and it still can give us an idea of things, but it's sort of been superseded now because we've got better information. So that's generally, what a panel looks like and what it means, all those numbers and things mean when you look at them. I talked about SNPs, and again, SNP stands for single nucleotide polymorphism. Again, that's sort of what those are, is sort of talking about the engine. All you need to know for now are that SNPs are another kind of mutation that occurs on the Y chromosome. The mechanics of how that SNPs mutate and the STIR markers mutate is different, but we don't need to know that for now. Susan, you got a question?
Yes. So when you were talking about sort of a genetic distance of 0 or a genetic distance of 1, what does that correlate to in time, or is that difficult to tell?
Well, they give you a range, and generally the more genetic distance between two people, generally it means most likely your most recent common ancestor with that person is further back in time, is a further number of generations. But it's a very inexact science. You just very quickly, Wilma's line, which is genetically connected with mine, she has a cousin who tested, and we discovered had a mutation, I think a 3-step mutation on one marker. And because of that, comparing to someone else in our group who had what we consider the modal value, it appeared that the distance was greater than it actually was. When she had another cousin from her line test, that cousin and this person in the other group matched exactly. So, it can vary just on the individual in terms of, and so, while it's a general guide, and like I said, when it was all we had, that's what you go with. But as you'll see, SNP testing can give us a great deal more information. So we'll come back to this table a little further on and take a look at some things. But just generally, what is a big Y700 test? Well, it's a variation or an upgrade or both of the Y-DNA STIR test. And so being a Y-DNA test, again, only males can submit their DNA for analysis. But don't let that discourage or deter any females from utilizing this test, because that all that means is you've got to find a male, in this case, Parke's cousin, to submit their DNA. Likewise, if I want to investigate a male line that's not my direct paternal line, for instance, my Parke's grandmother was a Bankston, and I wanted to learn more about the Bankston line, and I have done this. I had a couple of Bankston male cousins, submit their DNA. So, as a male, the only DNA you can submit for a big Y test or a Y DNA test is your own, for your own maternal line. But you can be involved in other projects, and of course, females can as well. So it's a little restrictive, but not that much. There's always a way to get in.
And Ken, just to be clear, because I know it kind of confused me, was not only you have to find a relative, a male relative with that last name. So in my case, my Parkes are very far back in my tree. So, I'm not going to necessarily be able to find a Parke relative to do the big Y test, at least not that I'm aware of. But it has to be that related person with that male related person with that last name.
Right.
Correct?
Right. Whatever surname it is you're researching or looking at, it has to be a direct male descendant bearing that surname. Unless, we won't get into the NPE thing right now. It can be ordered. just somebody walking off the street, never having tested before, you can order a Big Y 700 test. It's a little pricey right now. It's about, I think, $460, $470 $470 compared to the way the autosomal tests, Ancestry, and others have come down in price greatly. So compared to those, it's very expensive. You can order it also as an upgrade to an existing test. If somebody has taken a Y-DNA test, a STIR test, at 37 or 67 or 111 markers, you can upgrade to the Big Y at a reduced price. The higher up, if it's a 111 to Big Y right now, it's about $260 or somewhere in there. And FTDNA runs sales just like they all do several times a year, and you can save $20 or so by waiting for a sale to happen. And in most cases, when you've taken a Y-DNA test and you're simply upgrading, there's no need to submit a new DNA sample in most cases, because FTDNA, you send in 2 cheek swabs. They only use a small portion of that for a test, and they keep the rest in storage, frozen for, they claim, good up to 50 years. But with each new test or upgrade you order, they have to go back to that stash and use part of it. So theoretically, if somebody tested years ago at a 12 marker level and then upgraded to 25 and later to 37 to 67 to 111, or ordered an autosomal family finder test or a mitochondrial, their supply of DNA in storage may not be sufficient for them to run the Big Y test. In that case, Family Tree DNA would simply send you a new test collection kit, no extra charge, just whatever the charge for the upgrade is. That can be a problem in some cases where the DNA participant has passed away and a relative has control of their account. And if there is not sufficient DNA in storage, then obviously you're kind of at a dead end. I didn't realize I didn't mean to make that pun, but there you are. You're at a dead end. And in a case like that, then all you can do is look for another male relative who can supply the DNA for that line. And in some cases, that can be a problem because there are cases where people say, well, my father was the end of his line. He had no brothers and has no nephews and no first cousins. And then it's a problem. And then you simply have to go further up the family tree and start coming down in other branches to try to find somebody with the DNA you need. The 700 in Big Y 700 refers to additional STIR markers, those numbers that we saw on the panel. When you order a Big Y 700 test, you've already got 111, then you're going to get an extra 500 and something STIR markers. And right now, Gary and I talked about this the other day, and Dr. Lee Martinez, who we're referencing, has mentioned that right now, those additional STIR markers don't seem to be all that useful because there's no handy way to display them or compare them. Hopefully, Family Tree DNA will come up with some kind of tool at some point that will make them a little easier to work with. But the other component of the Big Y test is what we're focusing on, and that's what's really valuable, is the SNP testing that takes place. Again, SNPs are mutations that happen on the Y chromosome, and those occur at about a rate of about 82, 83 years every about 3 generations or so, there can be a mutation in the direct line. And because of that, we can sort of begin to look back in time and figure out when that particular mutation occurred in time. Sometimes it's very far back in time, but with additional test participants, we're finding that we're able to bring the SNP mutation information down to within a genealogical time frame, and in many cases within the last 100, 150, 200 years, which gets us into the area where most of us have some family tree information, and it may be possible then to link that particular STIR mutation to a particular ancestor, and that is very valuable. And so we're going to look at the method of doing that in just a moment. SNPs are what constitute the Y haplotree, which you may have seen online or can see. And it's basically, there's a huge trunk of a very ancient, haplotype. And then big branches come off of that with smaller branches, smaller and smaller stuff, until we get to the point where within our own lines, we're out on some tiny little twig. And that's what we'll sort of be seeing some examples of in just a moment. When you take a big Y700 test and you get your results back, there are a couple of ways of viewing those results visually. And this is one of them. It's called the block tree. Now, don't worry about not being able to read any of these numbers. I took a long range view just to give you an overview of what it looks like. And we'll zoom in just a moment and explain, some of the finer points to it. But if you're like me, I took a big Y test more than 2 years ago and didn't bother to take the time to really educate myself on it. I opened it up and looked at this block tree and I went, okay, what does this mean? What am I looking at? And that may be your response when we first look at it, but don't let that discourage you. We're going to try to shed some light on that today. In general, this is coming down in time. You'll see a string, and we'll look at those of STIR mutations that happened in chronological order. This is very far back in time until you reach a point where you have these blocks and these other blocks that break off from that. And you can see it's sort of narrowing down into finer detail. And again, we'll talk about that. You'll see your own result, outlined in a darker black, and it will say your branch underneath it. So that's a little bit of what we're looking at. Now, I'm going to take a second here, and I've stealed an analogy from, again, Dr. Lee Martinez, and you'll hear about him at the end of this presentation, because whether this analogy originated with him or not, I'm stealing it from him because when I heard it, the mental light bulb for me kind of went on. It finally started to make sense to me. And I may not do it justice, but the story sort of goes that somebody gives you one day a magical book, very large magical book. And you open it up, and on the first page there you see your name and your father's name, your grandfather's, and so on back in time. And you turn every page and the names just keep going by. Your direct male ancestry back in time. Obviously, by the time you get to the place in the book where this fella has it open, you're probably way past or beyond or back before the time that surnames were even adopted. And you keep going back in time and until you get way down in that book, back in the Stone Age when your direct male ancestor was somebody named Og or son of Og, until you get all the way back to the last page, and there's Y Adam. I've talked about Y Adam a couple of times, but without going into detail about it, the fact is that, as I've said before, every male alive on the planet today, as hard as it may be to comprehend, every male alive on the planet today descends from the same man, this Y Adam. He was not the first man. He was not the only man to live at his time, but because of the way DNA got inherited and some lines died out without reproducing and so forth, it all over time goes back to that one individual called Y Adam. So that's wonderful. We've got this book. We're thrilled. You had name after name after name going back chronologically in time. Who wouldn't love to have a magic book like that? Well, you close it up and you go away for a couple of days and you come back and you open it up again. You want to show a friend this wonderful book you have. And now there on the first page, for instance, this is my book. So there's my name and my father's name, his father's name, and so forth, all the way back to my first, second, third, fourth great grandfather, Samuel Parks. Actually, that's as far back as I can take my line. And so I would be thrilled if I could turn that page over and see more names and more names and more names. But this time when I open the book, this page still looks the same, these pages, but I turn it and there are blank pages. And in fact, even the next time I go and open up the book, some of the names that I know have disappeared. Okay, well, that's not great, but at least I still got some information. Now I can see my great-grandfather and his great-grandfather, and we turn the page and there's some blank pages, and then there's another name and some more blanks and another name. Still better than nothing. But the next time we come back to our book and open it up, some more magic has happened, and all of those names have disappeared, and now they've been replaced with these strange combination of letters and numbers. And what's important to know is, and what rang true to me is that this letter number combination, which by the way is a SNP mutation designation, but that is a specific individual in my direct male ancestry. Before, when we looked at the book, there was a name there. It's been replaced by the SNP mutation that ancestor first exhibited. And so in a way, these SNP mutations, these letter and number combinations, are the names of our ancestors. And they may be so far back in time that we would never know their actual names anyway. But for all purposes in our studies, these are our ancestors' names. It's not a group or a field or a population of people. It's a specific ancestor in our line who first experienced that mutation and passed it on to his sons and to his grandsons and so forth. The other thing is, when you look at one of these pages, you may see, several of these SNP mutations or names on the same page. And what we have to realize is that also these have all been scrambled. So they're no longer necessarily in chronological order. We don't know which came first and which came after. So at this point in time, until we have more information to put them in the right chronological order, they are all considered equivalent. And indeed, if we go to our block tree, here are those same, in this dark blue block, the same SNP numbers, which are all equivalent. And therefore, this is called a block of equivalence. Below that, you see a lighter block, more SNP mutations, more ancestor names in jumbled up order, and they are all considered equivalent. So there's a different block of equivalence, followed by more coming down until we all get down to the individual test takers. By additional test participants joining our project, it's possible to keep refining these blocks of equivalence, breaking them down into smaller and smaller blocks and giving us more information, and more information that's more recent in time. And so that's the goal of what we're talking about here. And this comes from Dr. Lee Martinez, who there was a rule of 3. I can't remember the gentleman's name that he borrowed it from, and he added another rule and made it a rule of 4. And the way we refine those blocks down to us is by following the rule of 4. Briefly, when you test yourself or someone in your line that you're studying, that person sort of becomes the anchor. The second rule is to test a close relative of the anchor, a father, a son, a brother, a nephew. And what this does is, because you will share a great deal of your SNP mutations, all of these mutations, until you get down to this light group, which are called private variants. That simply means that those are SNP mutations that have been observed in you. For instance, here, this is, and not enough people have tested within your family to match them. So right now they are private SNPs to you. When you test another close relative and they share those private variants, then they become named SNPs, and you start eliminating those private variants, and they get eventually put on the haplotree as named SNP mutations. The next rule, the next step you want to take is to test a fourth cousin of yourself or your anchor. What this does is gives you, again, it's another way to break up this block and refine it a little bit more. They will probably be similar to you and share a lot of your SNP mutations, but as it comes forward in time, depending on how far back your common ancestor is, they will have some differences, and that will be able to break out and visually appear on this block tree. And finally, the rule of four, the fourth rule, is to test your most distant known Y-DNA match. So if we look at our Y-DNA matches on the stir marker tests, find someone who's 7, 8, 9, 10 steps away at 111 markers, if you have them. Put your most distant match, your most distant cousin, and have them test. Now we're jumping back, not to confuse you, but we're back to group 34. And we've got some participants in this group here with us today. This is what their block tree looks like. Again, we'll zoom in a bit more in a moment. Again, across the top, you've got the line of ancient SNPs, and then you come to your first dark blue block of equivalence. And then below that, a lighter blue block of equivalence, a lot of equivalent SNP markers in there at this time. But they've tested enough to break it down here and here and here and here. You can see there's a whole part of the block tree over here. None of these people who have taken these tests are Y-DNA matches to people in this group. So for now, we're going to zoom in and ignore this left half of the block tree and concentrate on this over here. There are 13 participants in here represented. All 13 of them are in our group 34 on the Parks project. Zooming in, you'll see here's our anchor person, and without identifying people by name, our John Parke, who has joined us today and is one of the co-administrators of a breakout project. And I don't know if Deborah has joined us or not, Deborah Parks, but the two of them are co-administrators of this project, which is a more overarching. It's a SNP that's a bit higher up on this block tree, but it encompasses all of the people in this. And you can see that I've chosen one of the members who is an anchor person on here, and they have followed the rule of four. There are actually 3 tests in this on the far left, which says your branch. And so there are 2 close relatives. In this case, without giving away names, it's a son and a first cousin of that anchor person. In fact, there's another test in progress who is the brother of our anchor person. So they have a lot of information, on their very tight branch, and that's rule 2. We have the anchor person, rule 1. We've got close relatives in rule 2, and over here next to it, we have 2 individuals who are actually fourth cousins once removed of the anchor person to the left. So they fulfilled their rule 3. And you can see what it's done is broken out of this block of equivalence 2 different blocks here. And with more testing, that could even get refined a bit more. Going over, these other individuals in the project would qualify for Rule 4, distant cousins, distant Y DNA matches, but still obviously related, coming down here, but different branches of the family. And we begin to see those different branches. We go all the way over here, for instance. This is the SNP that is the breakout project. Everybody on this page here descends from this SNP mutation, RS20123. These 2 test candidates have not tested enough to bring their SNPs forward with any more refinement at this point. What we do know, which is interesting, is one of the test participants in that branch is a relatively young man with the Parke surname who lives in Scotland. And in fact, he traces his line all the way back to, I think, his earliest Parke ancestor was born in the 1600s. And his Parke line has been in Scotland all of that time. Well, that's very valuable information to know when you're comparing it to some of these other lines, some of which have Northern Ireland roots, some have Northern Ireland roots, but came to America sometimes early on. So it helps you begin to see genetically how these groups split off from each other and about how far back in time that was. We are going to have a separate Zoom meeting somewhere down the road where we can get as many people from this group together as possible. And we will go into great detail on this. And there's much to be learned. But I just wanted to give you an idea of how it can work. And how, for instance, here on this branch, you'll see there's one participant who's with us today. Hello. And he would benefit, obviously, from filling in his Rule 2 and 3, having an immediate family member test and having a fourth cousin test, because that would give more definition to his branch of the family. And the same in some of the others. Obviously, more testing, the better, because what you're doing is building your block tree almost from the bottom up until you get back to these large blocks that everybody descends from. Very quickly, just revisiting the stir marker display for this group. And we've shifted it over a little to the right, so we've got a few more markers to look at. And the only reason I did this is to point out a little example very quickly of something that we face with stir markers and illustrate how before we had SNP mutation information, it could be even more of a puzzle. When you see a group of, I wish my cursor was working better, but we have that pink 18 group and the 17 group above that. That seems to split the group pretty much in half. And very often when we see something like that, we consider whatever marker is considered a mutation from the modal value. It could possibly indicate a branch mutation. In other words, some individual back in time experienced that mutation, passed it on to his sons and his grandsons, his great-grandsons, and that marker value indicates a particular branch of a family tree. Well, looking over here at this marker, we see 2 different values again, 15 and 16. Again, our assumption would be likely that this might indicate what we call a branch mutation. But if we go over here, we've got these 2 test participants who both descend from the same earliest known ancestor. This is the same fellow, even though the dates are slightly different. But this Joseph Parkes is the same individual. And these 2 test participants descend from different grandsons of Joseph Parkes. So we look at their they're SNP mutations, and of course, they share the same terminal SNP. No surprise there. We look down a little bit further, and here's one other participant who also shares that terminal SNP. We look over here at his information, and we know from on our lineage page, this James Parks is almost certainly another grandson of Joseph Parks above. But this participant isn't sure who the father is. It's one of possibly two sons of Joseph Parks. But the SNP mutation tells us definitely that this is on a close branch of the family tree. And that's fine, and that's good to know. But what's confusing is we go over to this marker value, and you see these two gentlemen share a marker value of 15 here. And the fellow who is also closely related to them has a different marker value there that seems to belong to this other group. And we know that can't be the case because of the way DNA gets down, if this is a marker, a branch mutation marker. And it very well could be that some of those are. But in his case, we wonder how this could happen. Well, if we could look up at the top of this grid, you'll see that each of these stir markers is identified with a name, DYS 315 or something like that. And if you go up there, you'll see that we won't show it, but they're color coded differently. And when we look at this marker here where the 16 and 15 is, we see that it's color coded to indicate that it's a fast moving marker, which simply means that that particular marker has been observed to mutate at a more frequent rate than some of the others in the panel. And this is useful and necessary to get some delineation between people, but it can be deceiving. And in this case, because we have this stir marker information, my conclusion is that most likely this 16 marker value for this participant is probably an example of what we call a parallel mutation. We have the branch mutations that first occur and get passed down through that direct branch. But especially on a marker like this that tends to mutate at a quick rate, you can have another branch over here that's not a direct line of descent that experiences at some point in time that same mutation. And I think that's probably what has happened here. But it sort of just points up that though DNA is definitely based on science, and the science of DNA and the results don't lie, they're very reliable, but interpreting those results can sometimes be as much an art as it is a science. And this is a case where we have to take a lot of different factors into consideration. So again, that may be more detail and more talking about the engine than driving, but I just wanted to point that out. Very quickly, here's a screen grab. In addition to the block tree, when you take the big Y700, there's another way of visually showing how everybody compares and matches and descends. And this is called the time tree. And this is relatively new for family tree DNA. I think it's actually still in beta. And this is just a screen grab, but when you're looking at it live, you can scroll up and down and over to the left, you can go further and further back in time. But it's a different way to visually see how all of the people in this group, how their lines have split off from each other. And across the top, there's a timeline as well that gives you information. And I think Gary is going to show us an example of something very similar that he has constructed before this thing really became available. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and throw it over to Gary and let him give you some information. And then we'll come back and wrap things up. And if everybody's still awake or hasn't headed for the door by then, if you have questions, we'll stay here as long as it takes. Okay. So Gary, take it away.
Okay. Thanks, Ken. Great job. I actually learned a few things myself. Well, some of you may not know that Ken is a professional actor and has performed on Broadway. He's a great orator.
Was a professional actor and never actually performed on Broadway. Just,
Off Broadway.
just to clear that up.
I have not, and my verbal skills are going to pale in comparison. So maybe you can all help me out with some questions. Ken can certainly add some comments. All right, I'm going to put together a little presentation myself, and hopefully it's going to be quick. So I'm going to share my screen. It is a PowerPoint presentation that I just learned how to use this morning. So I just put it together. And let's go to the top. So Parke's Big Y 700 foundations. And these are the building blocks, the foundations of the Parke project. What I did is I went through all of the members of the Parke project and identified those people that had Big Y 700 testing. And there was only about 1 or 2 per group, and only about a little over more than half of our groups had Big Y testing. So we're really in our infancy here. This is the main chart. It has group 8, which is Ken's group. And if you go down here, he shows that he has roots in County Armagh, Ireland. And then if you go over here to the R, which is most of the people are from the R group. And this group here in green, RM 198, that is our Robert Parke line, lineage key T, which was the originating founding group in the society. They hail from England. This little snip over here, R1B, is where most of the people from the society branched from. And that's this chart here. You can see there's quite a few. On the bottom here are the groups that we're going to be concentrating on. Group 34. John and Deborah are the administrators, and the name of that project is RS2123. And my group is here, the KY lineage, and it branches off a little bit earlier than their project. Here's the RS2123 project, and these are their branches for those 13 members down here. I have a separate chart of their group, but I'm not going to show it today. So the big question is, you saw all of these big Y block charts with all of the numbers and the colors and the blocks. And the question some of you may be asking is, well, how does that relate to my particular lineage? So I'm going to attempt to try and answer that, or if not answer it, give you an idea about how it works. So I'm going to be concentrating on group 30, which is my group, and group 34, the Big Y lineages. So again, here's the, I'm concentrating for the group 34. I'm concentrating on the North American group because they are actually members of the Parke Society. And I've actually broken rules here on naming names. So if anyone has a problem with their name on the screen, let me know and I'll take it down. But here are some of the people, and you can see the different block groups that they are under. So what does that mean? I put together this chart to hopefully try and explain some of that. And I've actually taken the lineages and I've compressed it a little bit here. There's 3 generations in between the actual people that have tested and their ancestry goes back around the early 1800s. All of these people have tested Big Y. There's a male representative. And what I've done on the side here is I put together a ruler, snip ruler, and a timeline. So again, a snip mutates about every 2.5 generations, or about every 83 years. And that's just an average. It doesn't have to be that. It can be a lot less or a lot more. You can see that these are the furthest back that this particular person knows their lineage goes, ancestor of Joseph. I think you remember Ken mentioning a Joseph on that block tree. And these here are the SNP numbers that showed on those blocks. For example, this here, this FTA 52129. I'll go back to their block tree. And yeah, there it is right there. So these three lineages all have a common ancestor of RFTA 52129. And that's back about, count the number of SNPs. Here's 2 private variant SNPs. Here's another one. So that's about 4 SNPs back. And if you count back 4 SNPs, and the time correlates with this Joseph Parks of 1727, so that's about back about here in time. It could be this guy or his father or his grandfather, probably not much further back than his great-grandfather. And these people here share this particular SNP, which is probably back around sometime in the 1700s. Now, if you notice, all of these are, the furthest back they know of is in Ireland. And this one is in Ireland, and they went to Virginia. This person started in Virginia. These people went down into Pennsylvania, this guy into Louisiana. But you can kind of guess how far back your common ancestor is and where they might be, where to look for them in time, and where to look for them in the UK or in the States. So as Ken said, as more people start to test on this block tree, you're going to start to split up these blocks into more detail, and you'll be able to identify better, where the branches are. Now, here's mine. My distant cousin Dave, who's with us today, and I are the only ones that have tested so far Big Y for group 30. And we have one common or one private variant between us. Could be his father, my grandfather, and then this is our block equivalents of all our ancestors. Now, when you first test, this is the kind of thing you see. As more people start joining and testing, this block will start to break down, and you'll have more people, and you'll start to be able to identify where more ancestors might be or who they might be. This is my group 30 lineage breakdown. And as you can see, there's myself and there's Dave. And this is another Big Y that I have pending. The results will probably be in about a month or so. And that ought to split our block, and we'll be able to possibly tell more from that. And this is another person that I'm very hopeful that they're going to test, because that will tell us an awful lot, be like almost our rule of 4 here. And then ideally, what I'd like to do is I'd like to get members to test for all of these lineages, 1 or 2 each. And I think if we get 1 or 2 each from all of these, I think we might be able to start figuring this out. I was going to go into more detail about my lineage, but I'll leave that for another day. And I guess I'll send it back to Ken and the group for questions and see how we want to take it from here.
Okay. As soon as I get my screen back so I can, there we go. So I can get back to. Yeah. Oh, somebody keyboard is really going to town. So that's about it. We're just going to wrap things up here, and just a few points here, just to emphasize that DNA testing is a vital part of your research toolkit. If you haven't utilized it or utilized it fully, then you're really sort of cheating yourself. Just as census records are important, marriage records are important, military records are important. If you only rely on one of those, you're not going to get the complete picture. And if you're not adding DNA testing to those, you're not getting the complete picture. And indeed, if you're not using different types of DNA test, you're not going to get the complete picture. What we really make progress is when we combine the results from all the types of DNA tests that we've taken, along with all of the traditional record sources. And by cross-working all of those, you can really get a great payoff. For instance, in my own case, until we had a DNA match with people that had connections to County Armagh, we had no idea where our line may have come from. And once we did, then I was able to go over and start creating family group sheets for Parke's families in County Armagh using the limited census records that are available and marriage and birth records. And that enabled us, to locate some other potential test participants. So, you use it all, and it, back and forth, it reaps rewards. Again, with the DNA, for the Y DNA, the big Y test, it is expensive. And it also takes a good deal of time, much longer to get your results than it does with an autosomal test or some of the others, just because of the process involved of analyzing the DNA. It can be 6 to 12 weeks, sometimes more if they have trouble, and need to rerun things. And also what apparently they don't really tell you is once your results come back, it can be another 2 or 3 weeks before they have time to do what they call a manual review. Somebody actually looks at your results. And so your block tree information after 2 or 3 weeks from the time you get your results back will actually change a bit. So that's something that you need to be aware of, and they don't necessarily always make that clear. But because of the expense of this testing, and Dr. Martinez again pointed out that big Y testing, SNP testing, is a team effort. And that's true, because you need a team of people in order to break down those blocks of equivalent and get more detailed information. But in terms of the expense of testing, you can also make it a team effort. If you find a test participant who has the right DNA that you need, and they're interested in contributing their DNA, but they're not interested enough to fund their test themselves, then you can enlist others in your family line to contribute to that. Our Parks project, like all of them on our public website, has a general fund section there on the homepage and a donate button. And you can make a donation to the general fund, and you can specify what you want that donation to be applied to. It can be very general. It could be, for any Y-DNA, big Y DNA candidate in group 34 in the Parks project. Or you could be more specific and say, well, for any test participant from my lineage key G, for instance. Or you could make it even more specific. If you have a specific relative or cousin in mind, I want this applied to so-and-so's test. There are ways, and then we as administrators can follow your wishes and apply those the way you want them applied. But it's a great way for those who can't directly participate by donating DNA, but are interested in seeing how things go, to make a donation and sort of have some skin in the game. And by the same token, and this is something that I'm a few weeks ago realized and are trying to correct on my own part, is I have had a lot of this information sitting here in my computer for a long time. And I finally, made it available and tried to get it disseminated out to different branches of my family, because it's not doing me any good just sitting here in my own computer. So I've been sharing it and encouraging them to share it with others as well. Some people may or may not be interested, but if they hang on to it and it passes down to another generation, there might be somebody in that generation who's gets the genealogy bug and would find this information very valuable. I know when I started out, if I had found a book in a library that had the information that we have now on our particular Parks group, I would have been over the moon. I would have been jumping up and down for joy. As much as I enjoy the process of research and the challenge that it presents, I would take a huge completed genealogy any day of the week. I'd still take that. So make sure, when you participate in this, that you find a way to share that information with cousins, because it brings more people in, and it can make your recruiting of DNA participants and things and funding of those DNA participants easier. So briefly, here's a little resource page. I am going to create a Word document with this information, these links on it. And when I send out the notification about this meeting, this video being posted on our YouTube channel, I will send a link to that Word doc at the same time. And I think I can put a link to that Word doc on the YouTube page itself. But it's here. You don't need to write anything down right now. Briefly, these 3 YouTube videos, we've been talking about Dr. Lee Martinez. There are 3 videos, 1, 2, and 3 parts that he gave for a certain genealogical society. And they're each about an hour long with questions at the end. And he kept running out of time, so they made us part 2, and then they made a part 3. But he goes into a lot more detail than we have. And if you're interested, they're worth checking out. I've mentioned Roberta Estes before. She has a blog called DNA Explained. Excellent. And you can find blog posts on just about any aspect of DNA and DNA testing on there. I put 2 here of particular interest. One that I found extremely helpful is her the Dictionary of DNA. She explains a lot of these terms very clearly that we've been talking about. And there's a good section there on the big Y700 test as well. And the one below that is an older post that came out shortly after the big Y block tree was made available in 2019. The big Y700 has only been available since, I think, 2019. Before that, there was a big Y500 a few years earlier, and something called just the big Y a few years before that. But this is a relatively new test compared to the beginnings of our Y-DNA and then autosomal back in the early 2000s. So there's that, and you'll be able to explain it to check it out later. The important thing to remember about everything we've done and talked about today is some of it may sink in, a lot of it won't, and you're in good company, because it was exactly the situation I found myself into. I had to watch some of these videos multiple times, and I had to go and read things and study, and only gradually, because I'm a slow learner, I'll admit it, gradually things begin to sink in. So don't feel like it's overwhelming and it's something you'll never grasp. It takes time. It's not the most cut and dried sort of thing, but it's not impossible to understand. And again, it's easy to learn enough to be able to drive that car. You don't need to know how the engine works. So I would leave you with that thought. And I think Susan unfortunately had to leave us. I got a little note in chat. So
I ask a question.
sure, we'll let me get rid of this screen, and then we'll.
Ken, I just wanted to add something before we open it up for questions.
Sure, go ahead.
You know, one of the advantages of being part of the Park Project and Park Society is we're here to help you out. So, you know, we can take a look at all your different matches and answer any questions. So you're not alone.
Well, who's got the question there?
I do, Candace.
Okay.
All right, you said that it's done through the male line only. It has to be a male Y chromosome.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, my father was one of 7 boys, but they're all dead now. And they all, some of them had sons. My father had 5 daughters. So some of them are dead now also. So it comes down to 2 cousins that are still alive.
Mm-hmm.
So how would that work?
Well, if they're Parks males
Yes, they are.
in your line, then either one or both would be candidates to take the test, and that they could become your anchor person. And if they're close cousins, even first cousins could qualify as that close relative. You know,
They are first cousins.
so that could satisfy your rule 1 and rule 2 right there. So
I know I can get one easily. I'm not too sure about the other one. He's having some health issues. He is a lot older than I am.
mhm.
So that might, don't know how long
Well,
Don will be around.
yeah, if any of them have sons, then they could certainly qualify to submit their DNA as well.
You know, Ken, there's another possibility if the cost is too much for some people. If you have a lot of relatives, especially female relatives that can't participate in the project themselves, they can certainly contribute and, break that cost, that $200-400 cost down into manageable blocks. If you can, find a group of people.
Exactly. Yeah. More the merrier. Yeah, spread the wealth or spread the expense, that kind of thing.
You go through 2 cousins.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
This is the first time I've ever done this. I dragged my brother into testing
Mhm.
just so that we could have a place marker,
Mhm.
regardless of what happened, and have had too many other things. I inherited a lot of documents that are one of a kind. And so I've been spending more time scanning things than looking at DNA, but I wanted to make sure we had that. But one of the things I'm hearing you say is if we, even though we're not going to necessarily delve into it, for this decade, it would be a good idea to do the Y700 just as a community event that would add to everybody else's building their tree. Is that what we're talking about?
You grasp the concept beautifully. You're absolutely right. Even though people are testing who are not closely related to us and maybe distant past, everybody who takes a test in the Big Y helps refine that Y haplotree. And the more people who test, again, it's a relatively new test, and the growth in the number of people taking it has been phenomenal. But if this pace continues in 5 or 10 or 15 years from now, it's going to be amazing what kind of information you can glean from this. So yeah, anybody who wants to take it is, whether they match you directly or not, it's a good idea. And you know, as Dr. Martinez pointed out, he thinks, you know, down the road, 15, 20 years from now, it's going to be quite possible to begin to determine exactly which son of an ancestor you descend from, even though you don't have that paper record, that you'll have that kind of detail on the big Y haplotree. And
Well, it
that would
looked
be,
like our line didn't have many people having gone very far. It's K, I think.
Mhm.
And maybe this will get others started. And what I'm really trying to do is, should I have a grandchild who is interested, they'll have access,
yeah.
even if I don't get to it. My other question is, Gary, are you the manager of the Ks,
Manager of what?
of the lineage K?
No, but we
No,
actually have, I see she's joined
Susan's
us.
here. Yeah.
Susan Avery, who's on here and waving at us,
Yeah.
is the lineage leader for Lineage Key K.
Okay, I was
she-
intrigued with the offer of, I have signed up and made it so that we were members and all that kind of stuff, but I haven't had the time to figure out whatever it is that I'm looking at when I go on the site. It's less than Greek to me. And so the idea of there being a person who would say, okay, Cindy Parke, this number, here's what this all means. Is
Mhm.
there a little tutorial time that one gets?
Have we talked to each other via email yet?
I have talked to no one.
Oh.
I
Okay.
had a very busy life and doing,
Okay.
this is the
Okay.
first time I have come out of my hibernation.
Well, it's great then that you joined us today, and we'll all be in touch. Yeah, you and Susan will have much to talk about when it comes to the DNA aspect of your Lineage Key K. Then Gary and I could probably help you out with questions you would have there. And don't forget Father Michael Tad Parks over here, who's our historian. He also has a lot to contribute in the way. So if you have questions, if you have our addresses, which are on the website, you might copy all of us on an email, just so we're all sort of in the loop. And whoever has something to contribute can jump in.
Well, I have received enormous amounts of information from the Park Society. It's just figuring where it all fits.
Yeah. Very quickly.
For information purposes for Susan Avery,
Yeah.
Cindy's line is Roger Joseph
Okay.
Micaiah, Thomas Harris, and so forth. That's her
Okay.
line.
Has she, Cindy, have you done the group sheet paperwork for?
Yeah, I
Tad?
have. I'll send you her forms A and B.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Okay, good.
Cindy, where are you from?
Where am I living now, or
Yes.
where did family
Well-
had come from?
Well, the family.
I believe Roger, we've traced back to Lincolnshire.
Oh, no,
No,
I
I
mean.
He means, where do you live?
Yeah.
Where do
your
I
immediate
live?
fa-
Okay,
yeah,
I live in Oregon right now.
Okay.
okay.
Couldn't
I
be farther
think-
from North Carolina.
I think that Joseph and Susan can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they sort of went out through Indiana originally, that
No,
particular branch. Yeah,
Well, they-
Came south to
Yeah.
North Carolina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My people
Um,
my parks came from New Jersey
Well, yeah.
and
they
went
all did.
across,
mine.
stopped in various places in the Midwest, and then ended up in kind of following the Mormon Trail.
Right.
Okay. John Park, are you still with us?
Ken, I'm here, yes.
Great, great. Do you have anything to add or correct if Gary and I made some horrible blunders or anything like that?
Don't say anything, okay?
Okay, well.
Wait, sorry. Sorry, Ken, I have my very chatty aunt next to me. I'm in England at the moment. So you have to
Okay.
forgive me. I have to tell her to be quiet. Otherwise, she's gonna chat through the whole thing. Anyways,
What time is it there
I
now?
think what I really appreciate is that I think Cindy basically said it, if I understood correctly, is that we should think about the DNA that we provide, whether it's autosomal or Y-DNA, as part of our heritage, not only for our own families, but for all researchers who are interested in the Parke family, present and future. So in my own case, I had my father do a Y-DNA test and his first cousin, and unfortunately they both passed away. But of course, this is their heritage, which is obviously invaluable, particularly to my own family, and to be able to see where the whole Y-DNA research goes in the future. So as Ken and Gary and Cindy have said, I would likewise encourage everyone to find at least one male Parks relative to likewise do the Y-DNA test.
I have another question.
Sure.
Now, I've done the ancestry, so I have that. And
That's
I'm
awesome.
daughter of the American Revolution, so I have that paper trail too.
Hmm.
From Robert Park to Thomas to Joseph to Nathaniel to Smith Park 1, Smith Park 2, 3 to Orrin Park on down. So does that count at all?
Well,
Or is this,
sure.
what's the difference between the Y and all of this?
It's difficult for us in our Parks project to analyze or handle ancestry DNA tests. What you can do is you can download that file, that information, your DNA file, and upload it to Family Tree DNA, where we can not only include it in our project, but Family Tree DNA gives you tools that Ancestry does not offer in terms of chromosome browsers, where you can actually see what segments you share with other people on what chromosome. And it's possible to determine in some cases exactly which common ancestors you inherited from them, and identify those, for instance, as coming from your shared Park great-great-grandparents.
But she is talking about autosomal. It's not a Y.
It is, but as I mentioned, yeah, and Gary and I,
Which is still very useful.
yeah, Gary and I have been working on a way to reach out to the people who have joined our project, is we let anybody join who have joined with autosomal tests, because obviously they have probably joined because they have a Parks ancestry of some kind. And we've been trying to find the time in a methodical way to reach out to them and get that information from them, and obviously also ask them to join the society if they're not members.
So could you use mine? I mean, would my autosomal test be of use for that?
Well, it depends on how far back your Park ancestry is in your line.
Yes, really far back.
Yeah, if it's more than 6 generations, then it's doubtful that you have any measurable, identifiable
Right.
Park
Well,
DNA.
it does match on, I do get a lot of Park matches, autosomal matches. And I do have 2 living 5th cousins, one of whom you just met recently, James Douglas Park.
Hmm.
I've been trying to get him to take the Y-DNA test for years, and he keeps saying he's going to, but he doesn't. So,
Well, we'll have to lean on him.
Can I add something?
Sure.
So I was just looking at my DNA test on Ancestry today, And I was in Northern Ireland in October, November 2022, and I found some, let's say, new marriages related to Parke. And it's just today that I found a connection between myself and a descendant of a female Parke line. So I do concur that it is useful to do this an ancestry test or some other platform. I particularly like Ancestry. I haven't tried the other platforms, but what I like about Ancestry is they have this tool called Through Lines
Yeah.
that predicts how two people who have done a test on Ancestry are related. And most of the time I find it to be very accurate.
Mhm.
Of course, one needs to check the other person's research. And sometimes, of course, I find mistakes in my own research, but I would encourage doing that test as well.
I agree. And I've tested with Ancestry. I've tested with 23andMe. The advantage of doing that is, of course, well, first of all, Ancestry has the largest database of participants. It's a factor of, I don't know, 2 or 3 or more times the number of people that Family Tree DNA has in their autosomal database. So if you can fish in bigger ponds, then do so, and then same thing with 23andMe and any of the others. I was saying when Gary and I were talking about this the other day, though, I'm very selfish in that, Ancestry a few years ago actually did Y-DNA testing, and they dropped it, much to the chagrin of many
Oh,
people,
wow.
because they didn't handle it very well. They didn't handle that exit very well. But I think the good thing about that, it's a blessing in disguise, at least I consider it, is that now Family Tree DNA is the only place to go for Y-DNA testing, so that you're not missing anybody who might be a potential match. Whereas with autosomal, we have to, hit all of these different sites in order to find different people who've only tested with that company. With Y-DNA testing, if they've done a Y-DNA test, they're here in Family Tree DNA. So I hope that doesn't change. Very selfishly, I hope that aspect doesn't change because it makes our lives much simpler.
Ken, does it help that I do have my autosomal DNA on Family Tree, and 23andMe and GEDmatch and Genie and Net and MyHeritage? I've got it just about every place that you can have it. So
yeah, it does help. And as I say, you can't test with these other companies and upload it to Ancestry, but you can take your Ancestry test and upload it to Family Tree DNA.
yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah. Ancestry, let's not go there. We love them and we hate them.
Exactly. But it's still the best.
Yeah. They're
the largest, like you said, it's the largest database.
They're the big kid on the block, and they are a business. They are there to make a profit. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to recognize that they are driven and motivated, especially because they've been sold a few times. They're run by people who are not necessarily genealogists or interested in genealogy. They're there to maximize profits. Whereas Family Tree DNA, which has also been sold recently, but that was started by people who were genealogists who wanted to explore their family tree. And so everybody involved had that common interest. And whereas with Ancestry, because of the way they market their DNA test, a lot of people have only tested because they wanted to find out, I say, the kilt versus lederhosen aspect, your ethnicity mix. And once they sort of get that little readout, they're done. They walk away, and you try to contact them, and you may never hear from them.
Exactly, you never hear from them.
It's very frustrating. But we're not here to trash Ancestry DNA today.
I have to interrupt. I have to leave. I have an appointment. So
Well,
someplace
thank
to
you
go,
for
so-
joining us, and it was nice to meet you.
Okay.
Okay,
Nice
well,
meeting all of you too. See you hopefully next time.
hopefully so. Great.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Mhm.
I have a question for John. Where are you located?
Hi, I'm not sure who's speaking, but I am currently in England. I live in Luxembourg, Europe. My ancestry to date is from Northern Ireland, a place called Ballynear Parish in County Antrim.
Okay. Your accent was giving you away.
Yes, I'm Canadian.
Okay. All right. So,
Well, we hope you don't look down on us because we're we're Americans.
I have a question for Suzanne's iPhone. Can-
Okay.
Who,
Yeah.
okay, who is this?
This is Suzanne through her iPhone. Oh, what is my number? 1067?
He wants to know who you are, I think. What's your last name?
Kristen.
Oh, okay, all right, okay. Kristen. I have a question for you. This is regarding your son.
Yeah, who is busy writing his thesis and looking for jobs. So I think filling out forms is not at the
Well,
top of the list. Of
No, can you send me or give me information, his address, phone number, email address, so I can get you in the books, okay? Because
Oh, yeah.
I think I sent you an email on that.
You did, and I sort of forwarded it to him, but take a look and fill it out myself.
Yeah, just send me that rudimentary terror. That gives me enough information to get you on the books, so he's in the society and he gets the next newsletter, okay?
Okay,
So if you would do that, that'd be most appreciative, all right?
well,
Okay. Jay Parks, you've been sitting there, and it's almost like you are the first person I've seen that can stay in the same position for the whole meeting. Introduce yourself.
Hello, how are you?
And where do
Can
you
you hear me?
live?
Jay?
Yeah,
Hey, so I live in Michigan. I live in Detroit, Michigan.
okay.
And Jay is a cousin of mine and of Wilma's.
Cool.
And
cool.
we're going to have to, like I said, get back in touch and start working together soon. But we may have to try to rope him into the society. And also,
I was hoping.
and we may actually have to talk about maybe the big why,
Oh, cool.
possibility.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was definitely interesting. And so I know I didn't take that, but now looking back and listening and kind of thinking about it, it's maybe that is the next step for me.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
Nice to meet you, Cousin Jay.
nice
yeah.
to meet you.
So we'll talk. We'll talk.
Okay. Okay.
One last question and then I need to go.
Sure.
I go on and I upgrade to the Y700.
hmm
Do I need to do anything that gets it then the information onto you, or are you just right there connected to?
As administrators, we get notice of when you order an upgrade or a new test, and when the results come in. So we'll be on top of that. So yeah, but thanks for asking. So
Okay, I have one more question that might have some general applicability. I'm
Sure.
not sure. Welcome, Jay, by the way. I just got an email from a fellow in Iowa wondering if he's found me on Ancestry. And he said, "Are you connected to the Parkses from Uniontown?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, my parents took their honeymoon to Iowa to go hang out with my dad's uncle, who was a preacher. And yep, his dad or his grandfather was a preacher, and it all fits." And then I followed up a little bit and said, "Hey, we have this thing coming Saturday, Can you get back?" And I sent him some more questions, and not getting a lot of response. So anyway, my question is, for DNA purposes or any other purposes for that matter, it would be having him more active be nice, very interesting. Oh my God, you got to get him. Where on that continuum? I mean, what should I do?
I'd say all of the above, but yeah, no, anytime anybody wants to get involved either in the society and add their branch of the family into our database or participate in the DNA project, it's all good. And it's all just makes it richer and more complete. So at whatever level you think he might be comfortable, and of course, over time that may change, do encourage him, and if he's got any questions that we can answer, send him our way.
Well, since he hasn't responded in a couple of weeks, would there be some video, some link? Gary, I personally liked your chart that said, hey, you people are from Asia. Yeah, well, that really woke me up. I'm like, oh, no kidding. Is there something that the club has, that any individual has, that you've used to really grab somebody's interest?
Well, we don't have that many videos on our YouTube channel right now, but at some point we might be able to put something together like that. But right now I can't think of anything that of a more general nature that might help draw him in. But maybe down the road, I wish I could point you to it, but right now I'm not sure there's anything quite like that. Right.
Well, the fact that he contacted me, he must have some interest. So maybe Gary, if you and I can communicate, and I can get I did a screen grab of your thing, but there wasn't enough on the screen at one time to show what I think I want to show him.
Yeah, you want me to reach out to you and you can trade info?
And the other aspect of that, Carrie, is don't worry if you don't hear from him, for a couple of weeks or more. People have things going on in their lives that we're not aware of, and it's not because they're not interested anymore. I think it's just, like Suzanne mentioned with her son, he's in the middle of writing a thesis and doing all that sort of stuff. So life happens, and genealogy isn't always at the top of the priority list. So don't worry about not hearing from him, in a timely manner. But after a while, if you haven't heard from him, just send him a little, hey, checking in, how you doing, what's up, kind of email.
Ken, remember the video that I did of the Park Society work office?
Yep.
Is that online somewhere? Would that be useful to?
It's certainly online. It's certainly on our Park Society YouTube channel. So it's there. Yeah.
All right, that might be that. We are going to be doing a few videos, 2 to 3 to 5 minute type things. Mr. Wood is going to be helping me with that. Yeah, and we're going to get those out there sometime in the future. But right now, maybe that would be a useful thing for the time being.
Yeah, you could take a look at that, Carrie, and see if that's something you might want to direct him to or something. Okay, well, thank you all. If there's no other questions right now, we're running a little long, but I'll be throwing this up on our Park Society YouTube channel in a day or two when it's ready, and we'll have a link to this resource page and things. And again, if you have questions, and if watching this again or looking at some of those things still leave you sort of wondering and wandering, don't be afraid to reach out with questions, because like I said, you're in good company, and Gary and I certainly don't consider ourselves experts. We're all learning, we're all on a learning curve. So, just get in and start doing it. That's the best way to learn anything. So,
Ken, I have one sideline question.
Sure.
I've sent my piece that was for the Historian's Corner to Paul to look at and to advise. I have not heard back from him, which is unusual. Did you happen to read my piece and see my questions for him?
I'm not sure I did. So if you don't have to run away, if you want to hang on, we'll
Yeah,
end the
I would
meeting.
do that. Mhm.
We'll end the meeting and then you and I can talk. I'll just
Okay.
stop recording. And that, I said, where is pause, stop recording?